Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer and welcome to Best Kept Plans. Today's video is going to be a reading wrap up for the month of May 2022. I am so excited to share with you all the books that I read this month. If you're interested in seeing that, please stick around. I have been looking forward to recording this video for weeks. Literally since like halfway through the month of May, I've been looking forward to recording this video because May was an awesome reading month for me. I read a bunch of really great books that I really enjoyed. I don't think anything that I read this month rated under a 4 for me, which is awesome. So this video is going to take you through the books that I have read so far this month. There is a few days left in May, and I have intentions on reading probably 2 more books this month, so I will go over that towards the end of the video. As usual, I will be referencing my Archer and Olive B. Harris collab notebook. This is where I keep track of all the books that I read every month, and I will be referencing this as we're talking about the books that I read in May. I do want to preface this list with saying that I loss at the end of April. My grandmother passed away at the end of April, and that definitely influenced the books that I read this month. There were a few that I read that were very intense, had really important and not light, heavy subject matter, but the vast majority of the books that I read this month, I would say, were a little bit lighter, easier to get through, more straightforward, and that's kind of where my head has been at this month. That's just kind of what I've wanted to read, and so you'll see that as I'm going through this list. The first book, though, that I read in the month of May definitely does not fit into any type of like light, fluffy, easy to read kind of category, although it was easy to get through. It took me only 3 days to read it, and that is The Nightingale by Kristin. Now, I don't have the book. I borrowed it from a colleague at work, and so if I can figure out how to put a picture of it right here, I will do that. I'm not sure that I will be tech savvy enough to figure that out, but I had seen this book at the bookstore. It caught my attention because of the title. I'm a nurse, so Nightingale obviously makes me think of my girl Florence. And so I was curious if nursing or the origins of nursing had anything to do with the story. They don't, but I did mention it to one of my colleagues that I had seen it and didn't purchase it because it's really long and I have big book fear. And she said, "Oh my gosh, you need to read it. It's so good. It's long, but you'll get through it quick." She was right. It took me 3 days to read it. I finished it in 3 days, and it was 564 pages. It was incredible. I loved it. It broke my heart over and over and over again, but it was such an incredible book, and I gave it 5 stars. It was easily a 5-star read for me. I also believe that it is being made into a movie, and because I looked it up online. I think my colleague had mentioned that to me, and so I looked it up online, and when I did, there really wasn't much of any information, but I'm pretty sure that it is being made into a movie, and I think I saw that they cast Dakota Fanning and Elle Fanning as the 2 main characters, which if they did, I think is great, because I think they're both really great actresses and they could do really great things with this book and this material. So I'm excited if it does become a movie. Next, I read a book that I have been very excited about for months. I learned that this was coming out early in 2022, and I've just been desperately waiting for it. So I finished The Nightingale on the 3rd of May, and I literally went to the bookstore that day to pick up Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is the 3rd Emily Henry book that I have read. I read Beach Read a few years ago. I think when it first came out, I read People We Meet on Vacation a few months ago. I loved both of those books, and I loved this one as well. Emily Henry just does it. She just does it right. She does romance really well, and I gave this book 4 stars. I enjoyed and appreciated the relationship between the 2 main characters. I love that it took place in a little small town. I loved the ending and how that ended up working out. So this was definitely a good read for me if you're interested in a light romance, but an emotional romance at the same time. This is a good read for that. Also, the 2 main characters are book lovers, and if you're reading and watching this video, chances are you're a book lover too, so that's really cute. The next book that I read was part of my Instagram challenge. So I have a challenge in my journal. Let's see if I can find it here. I ended up asking for people on Instagram to recommend books for me. And so each month from April to the end of the year, I'm going to read 1 book a month that's recommended to me by someone on Instagram. And I have recommendations through September. I do need to post again to ask for a couple more, because a lot of times what happens is I'm recommended books that I already read. So I do need 3 more to finish out the year. But for May, the book that I was recommended came from Alex at Artsy Plans. Her and I feel like have similar book tastes. We're always talking about books. And she recommended Homegoing. And I'm so glad that she did, because this book was absolutely incredible. Again, I definitely leaned a little lighter, a little fluffier, a little easier to read most of this month, but this book is definitely more heavy. It deals with a lot of important subject matter, and it has really incredible messaging throughout the story. It's a multi-generational story, and it really takes you through so many intense things, decision making and how that can affect familial relationships, decision making and how that can affect, future generations, colonialism, slave trade, the mistreatment of Black and African American people in this country even after slavery was abolished. Segregation, all of those things. It is told in such an interesting way, and you really only get, for a lot of the times you only get a character in 1 chapter, but she makes you care about every single one of them. And it's really incredible that she does that. I love this. This was easily a 5-star read for me, and I definitely want to read more of her. I believe she has a book, Transcendent Kingdom, that I've seen that I need to pick up and read, because this was so, so good. Next, we have another Colleen Hoover book. So I read a couple of Colleen Hoover books. One, Verity, I didn't really like that much, but I really loved Ugly Love, which I read last month. So I wanted to dive into another Colleen Hoover. A lot of times she does deal with some heavier subject matter, even though it is in more of like a romance type of a format. And I ended up reading It Ends With Us this month. I would not consider this a romance. I would consider this a book about domestic violence that has a maybe C storyline that relates to romantic love. I think there should be a trigger warning for this. I knew this was about domestic violence prior to reading it, because I had seen something on BookTube here on YouTube, and I'm glad that I did, because that to me is really the key of the story. There is some romantic elements to it, but that's not really what the story is about. The story is about a woman trying to find the strength to get herself out of an abusive relationship and trying to break generational trauma related to domestic violence. So this was easy to read, and I got through it very quickly, but it's certainly heavier subject matter. So I think people should be aware of that before they read this. I did give this 4 stars. I thought it was good. Next, we have a book that was on my May TBR. So I did record a video about the books that I wanted to read in May 2022, and I'm pretty sure that most of the things that I did read did not end up on, like, were not on that TBR initially, but this one was. And this is another book that was recommended to me by one of my colleagues, and it is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I have read a few different mystery thriller books. I have enjoyed the ones that I have read, and I mentioned that to one of my colleagues, and she recommended this. I had not read young adult in a very, very long time, since like my early college years. And so I was curious to read a young adult book again, especially a murder mystery. I've never read a young adult murder mystery before. And I really like this. Like, I enjoyed this a lot. It was interesting. As it's taking you through the mystery, I definitely had like inklings or thoughts on who I thought did it or what I thought happened, but the ending was still like a surprise to me and not something that I 100% saw coming. So that was really good. And this is a series, so we will get to talking about more of it in a little bit. Again, I gave this 4 stars. Not sure if I mentioned that. Next, I have a book that I was not planning on reading this month because I didn't know it existed. I did do a May book haul video. I picked up a few books. It was a little mini book haul. And I mentioned this book in that video because I randomly picked it up at Target, and that is The Cheat Sheet. So I was at Target for something completely different, and I decided to just walk through the book section, and I saw this book and it instantly caught my attention. Bright green cover, yes, but also because there is a dancer on the front. I grew up dancing, and so it immediately intrigued me. I could tell it was a romance, and so I decided to pick it up and give it a read. I ended up getting through it in one day. It's not long. It's probably around 300, a little over 300 pages. I loved it. I really, really did. It's a best friends to lovers trope, which is not something I've read a ton of, but definitely think that I really like because I absolutely adore Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, and that is similarly like a best friends to lovers type of a thing. So I think this is a trope that I just enjoy, and this was just cute. It was adorable. It was easy to read. I really liked it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Next, we have another book that I was not planning on reading this month. If you would have asked me prior to reading it, I probably would have told you, no, I'm not planning on reading that ever because it's nonfiction. And I'm not really a huge fan of nonfiction. I don't go out of my way to try to read nonfiction, but I saw this at the bookstore and I was like, well, I love her. I love this person. I love everything she does. Maybe this would be a good way for me to try to get into nonfiction. And that is Why Not Me by Mindy Kaling. I adore Mindy Kaling. I think she's hysterical. I loved her on The Office. I loved The Mindy Project. I love Never Have I Ever. I love The Sex Lives of the College Girls. If you haven't seen any of those shows, please watch those shows. They're so, so funny. She's so good at what she does. And I picked up this book and I really, really enjoyed it. I realized pretty early on that it's not a memoir, and I think that helped in me liking it as much as I did and getting through it. It's actually just a collection of essays, and I really enjoyed it. It was just so funny and good, but had like good lessons in there, and I just really appreciate her insight and where she's coming from. And this definitely made me want to read her other book because this is the second book that she's written. Her first book is called, it says it right on the front here, Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me and Other Concerns? So after reading this, I definitely would read her other book. I got through this honestly in it was 2 days. It took me 2 days to read this. And when I picked it up, I was like, this is going to take me forever. It's going to take me like a week to get through this book, even though it's, I think, barely 200 pages. Yeah, it's a little over 200 pages. So I ended up getting through it in 2 days. And I will say the diagram of the author's heart on the back it is so funny. Like, a sizable chunk of it is just for Stephen Colbert. And I will say, I completely understand. I love Stephen Colbert. Another part is subtweeting my enemies. There's a chunk of it that's heavy celebrity drama. There's another chunk that's her cell phone charger. There's a big chunk that is her family and her work. There's a very, very small chunk that's nice guys and a large chunk that's handsome jerks. Like, it's just so cute. So anyways, I really enjoyed this book. Highly recommend. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. Next, we have a book that was not in my TBR, but was in my May haul video. I, again, have been leaning a little bit more lighter, fluffier, easier to get through, heavy on the romance this month. And I went to the bookstore and I saw this, and I know I had seen it talked about here on BookTube. I think I've seen it posted about on Instagram, and I've heard good things. So I decided to pick it up, and that was The Simple Wilds. I am so glad that I did. If you watched that mini haul video, I was saying in it how like I just kind of want to pick this up right away. I ended up reading Mindy Kaling's book first, but I picked this up soon after, and I really enjoyed this. It was I liked it more than I thought I was going to after the first 25 to 50 pages, because in the beginning, I do feel like the author is trying a little bit too hard to almost make it like an enemies to lovers trope, and I don't feel like that's what this is. Like, I just think that the two main characters and the love interest, like, they just didn't know each other, and they started off on the wrong foot because of weird circumstances, and once they started getting to know each other, they liked each other. So I don't consider it an enemies to lovers at all. I just think it's like a misunderstanding kind of first meeting, but I really ended up loving this book. And it's funny because I was like 3/4 of the way through and I posted about how much I was liking it on Instagram, and Alex at Artsy Plans ended up messaging me saying it's a series. So I immediately got the second one. That way, once I finish this, I can start it, which is exactly what I did. So I gave this 4.5 stars. And then I immediately started the second book, which is called Wild at Heart. It picks up right where the first book leaves off. It's definitely a different story. There are different challenges in this one, but I really enjoyed this one too. And as I was reading it, I did a little bit more research on the author in the book, and I saw that there were basically 2 more books in the series. One of them is like a little short novella that they consider book 2.5, and then there's a book 3, and I couldn't find them at the bookstore, so I ordered them online because I desperately wanted to go right into the book 2.5. I ended up giving this 4 stars. Unfortunately, my order with those books got delayed several days, so I didn't get to go right into the next book. Instead, what I ended up picking up was the second book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, which is called Good Girl, Bad Blood. And I loved the first book, and I knew I wanted to finish out the series. Again, I was hoping to finish out the Wild at Heart series first, but because of, order delays and stuff like that, that didn't happen. But I was glad that I had this on hand to start, and I started it and I finished it basically almost in one day. I read the first 50 pages the first day, and then I finished it the second day that I read it, which was yesterday. I finished it last night. I loved it. I actually think I loved it more than the first one. So I gave the first one 4 stars, and I would give this one 4.5 stars. I really, really liked this book a lot. Now, again, as I said, I finished Good Girl, Bad Blood yesterday, and I actually got my package with the next books in the Simple Wild series yesterday. So I am today going to pick up Forever Wild, which is book 2.5 in the series. It's a little novella. It's only about maybe 150 pages long. And I think this is where I'm going to leave the series for now. Why? Well, after I ordered the 2 books, I did a little bit more reading, because Alex at Artsy Plans and I were talking about them, and she realized that the book 3, the next main book, again, this is like a short little novella, but the next main book is actually not about the main character of The Simple Wild and Wild at Heart and this book. It's a different character from the series, and I don't want to read about her right now. So what I'm going to do is read this today. I definitely can get through this today. And then I'm going to leave the Simple Wild series to be. I think that maybe at some point in the future, I'll go back and I'll read that book 3, even though it's about someone else. But once I read this, I'm just going to dive right into the third and final book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. This one's called As Good as Dead. Again, I really liked the second book. I liked it even more than the first. So I want to dive into this as soon as possible. And I think I should be able to finish Forever Wild today and start this today. There's a few days left in May, 4 days left in May. And so I should be able to get through these two books by the end of the month. I'm not sure that I'll start anything else before June. We'll just kind of see how I'm feeling. But I'm very excited for these last two books that I'm definitely going to get to this month, but just haven't had a chance to finish. And that's it. That is my reading wrap up for the month of May 2022. Again, it was such a great reading month for me. I read a bunch of books that I really, really enjoyed, a couple series that I ended up really liking, and it just makes me even more excited to get into and dive into reading more books in June. I am going to be posting a June TBR video if that hasn't posted already. I'm hoping that I stick with my June TBR a little bit more than I stuck with my May one, but you know, that's kind of like the exciting thing about reading. You can just kind of pick things up when you decide that they make sense for you, you know, and go with where, you know, your heart flows in terms of what's appealing to you. So look out for that June TBR video. If you have any comments about the books that I read and talked about in this video, please put them down below, spoiler free if you can. If you have any book recommendations for me, absolutely put them down below. And as always, everyone, please be safe. Bye-bye.